We're Malin and Johan, a Swedish couple that have been sailing full-time since 2016. After 3.5 years of sailing, we welcomed our daughter Vera on board. Most recently, we bought a farm in Sweden where we're going to build our dream boat ourselves from scratch. Welcome aboard and please subscribe for weekly episodes.
So the other week we talked a little bit about how we're going to prepare the ground outside the barn for when it's time to move the hull outside and have it flipped over the right side up. But we never talked about how we're going to do that operation. How are we going to move this massive boat, lift it up in here and roll it out and have it flipped over? And this is something that we've been thinking a lot about, and we've been, it's kind of nerve-wracking just thinking about it, because we've been putting in a lot of hours in this, and I mean, it's not ready yet, but there will be a lot of time and money invested in this hull. So when it's time to flip it over, we don't want anything going wrong, because we could potentially lose 1 year of labor and of course all the money that we have put into this. So we thought about maybe we should build our own gantry cranes from timber, 2 of them outside, and we were thinking of putting wheels on the strongback to make it become a big cart, so we could just roll the hull outside into those home-built gantry cranes and turn the hull over inside of those. But then we got an email from Anders, and he works at a company called Tunga Lyft, and they specialize in complicated heavy lifts. And yeah, he reached out and told us that he wanted to help us out with this complicated lift. So the other day, he and his colleague Marcus, they came out here to the farm to have a look at the boat and also the situation outside. And they of course have some really specialized equipment for this. So we will use machine skates to lift the hull up, probably hydraulic skates or with jacks on those skates. And then we will roll the boat out, and we will have 2 big gantry cranes, hydraulic gantry cranes with wheels on them, so we can pick up the bow or the front of the boat, roll it out, and then connect another gantry crane, so we can flip the whole boat inside those massive gantry cranes. We haven't figured out all the details yet. We will have another meeting at the end of the summer and see how the time frame looks by then, because the hull isn't ready yet. But I'm so happy that we have this connection now, because this will help us a lot. And it takes a lot of weight off our shoulders, that we now know that we will get the help from professionals that deal with stuff like this on a daily basis, and that nothing will happen to the hull that we have invested so much in when it's time to turn it over.
So we have something exciting happening this summer in July. We're going to open up the farm and the workshop for all of our patrons to come on an open house. So you can see how far we've come in the boat build, how we live, and we're so excited to meet some of our patrons, and we'll have a fika here on the farm and just have a really nice day. So if you've been thinking about supporting our production, you can join our Patreon crew and you will find the invitation there. And we know many of you won't be able to make it. A lot of you are spread out in the world, but we'll try to do a little live stream or film that we can show, so you almost get the feeling like you're here in person. And I also want to take the opportunity to really thank all of our patrons who support our videos, because without you, it wouldn't really be possible to make these videos, because it takes so much time to make them. And it's so cool. I mean, some patrons have been there almost since day one, when we started back in 2016. And it's amazing to see that people are willing to, pay a little bit of money to see what they want to see from people who are not, have a big production company behind them. It's just Johan and I who wanted to share, our adventures and the sailing and traveling we did, and bought a camera and learn how to film and produce videos. So, and also if we can do it, you can do it as well if you have something exciting that you want to share. So just a big thanks to everyone who supports our production. Sorry about my raspy voice, guys. I hope you can hear me anyway. This is what the boat looked like a couple of days ago. You get a whole different feeling of the hull when you're standing inside of it. There you can really feel how big it is in a way that isn't possible when standing right next to it. You also get aware of how much more planking there is to be done.
And for the past weeks when we've been planking the hull, I've been thinking a little bit about the stem here. And just to give you some context, this is actually not the real bow of the boat. Later on, when we have a fully planked hull, we're going to cut all of these cedar strips in a straight line so that they will line up with the face of the stem here. And once that is done, we're going to produce a bow cone that we will glue in place on top of that. And that will be the actual bow of the boat. And once that is done, we're going to put fiberglass on top of everything here. But before all of that, we really have to make sure that these strips, the cedar strips, are well connected to the stem here on the sides. Right now, they're glued in place with epoxy, and these screws are just temporary to hold the strips in place during the curing process, so we can remove them now. The problem here is that the grain in the cedar strips is in this direction, and the grain in the stem is in this direction, so 90 degree. And that's not ideal. Ideally, the grain in both pieces that you glue together should be in the same direction, but that's obviously not possible here. So I think it's plenty strong enough as it is, but just to be sure, we're going to use dowels as well through each and every strip here. So that's what I'm going to do today. And I'm thinking I will start on the other side, and we have this kit where you can make your own dowels in the press drill. We're going to use Oregon pine, or Douglas fir, I think it's called in the US. It's a pretty bit denser wood than the cedar, but maybe not as strong as the oak, but I think it will be perfect for these dowels. And we will set them in epoxy.
Now we have all the dowels, so Johan marks out where he will drill the holes. The dowels go through the cedar strip and into the oak stem. Everything that we glue on the boat is made with epoxy glue. Johan cuts off the dowels to make them flush to the hull surface, and then he sands the area.
It's been a few hours now and the epoxy is fully cured. It's pretty warm and we're still using that fast hardener, so the epoxy cures pretty quickly. I just gave it a quick sand to see how it looks, and I think it turned out really good. There's going to be a lot more sanding later on once the hull is fully planked, but this was just to see how it looks. So we're going to use these dowels for the rest of the stem, all of the strips that are going to be connected to it. I'm going to do the other side tomorrow, but for now it's back to do some more planking. We still have 6 or 7 of these long strips to go before it's back to the ripping saw. Yeah, the last few days has been really productive and the planking has moved along pretty nicely actually. Yesterday I mounted a few more strips, so now we only have 1 more to go on this side and 3 to go on the other side. And once those are mounted, we're pretty close to 50% of a fully planked hull, 48% to be exact. I just gave it a quick sand back here. Because as you can see, we were getting into that turn of the bilge back here in the stern. And back here it's actually one of the more tighter radiuses that we have on the hull. So it's a good spot to check how it will work out with this width on the strips. How much sanding it will take to get a fair curve. I was a bit worried before that this twist, as you see up here, that would be a bit too much for these strips, but so far it's been okay and not too hard to mount it. I'm thinking that the next strip up here will be the last or the hardest one to mount, and after that it should become easier again, because then the rest of the stations here, we're getting into the radius on those as well a bit more, and then the strips should have less flex in them or twist. Some of you have asked if we're going to put any bevel cut on the strips to make up for the radius, so we won't have any gaps on the outside. But that's not necessary in this type of build. We'll just fill those gaps with epoxy when we glue the planks in or the strips in place. And so far that's been working pretty good back here. And there are places that we have to come back and fill before we sand the whole hull. But putting a bevel cut on all of these strips will be a lot of work in a big boat like this. And in my opinion, it's not worth doing it really. If it would have been a true wooden hull, of course, it would have been a different story. But since this is sandwich hull, it's not really necessary to do that. Also, like many of you have pointed out, it's really time now to start building some scaffolding. I wanted to wait a little bit because we want to have a scaffold that is pretty high so we can reach as far as possible inwards. because we still have 50% to plank. So I'm thinking we will build the scaffolding somewhere in this height. Still haven't figured out exactly how we're going to do it. And the plan for today is to mount the last of the strips, and after that it's either time to start ripping and planing again, or we should start building the scaffolding. I'm thinking maybe it's a better idea to start with the ripping and planing and rip the last of the cedar, all of it, in one go. And then we can move the rip saw so we have space to build the scaffolding on the other side as well.
One cedar strip left, but the epoxy needed a refill. So Johan filled up with a slower hardener this time. Thank you for watching this episode. Hope you enjoyed it and see you next week.